The mansion on Hillcrest Avenue glittered beneath the morning sun, its marble pillars and sweeping lawns standing like symbols of everything Alicia Wilson was born into. Inside, servants moved with careful steps, their eyes lowered whenever her mother passed. Wealth had ruled this house for 3 generations, and expectations came dressed in pearls and quiet obedience. Alicia stood before the mirror in her room, her reflection caught between elegance and unrest. Her father's portrait watched from above the fireplace, a reminder of lineage and legacy. She had been taught that her destiny was fixed: marry well, protect the family's name, and maintain appearances. But lately, she found no joy in any of it. Lawrence had entered her life like a soft wind, unexpected, warm, and dangerously simple. He wasn't rich, nor did he try to impress her. He ran a small architectural firm downtown and spoke of life as though it could be lived without fear. Alicia had met him during a charity renovation project her family sponsored. He'd worn no tie, only a rolled-up shirt and a smile that made her forget she was the Wilson heiress. That morning, she wrote a note and placed it on her dressing table. "Mother, I am leaving for good. I have found a kind of peace this house could never give me. Please do not look for me." When she stepped out with her suitcase, the guards at the gate looked uncertain. No one dared to stop her, though they exchanged startled glances as her car disappeared down the avenue. Weeks later, Alicia rented a small flat on the city's quiet edge. She wore plain clothes, tied her hair in a knot, and found work as an assistant in Lawrence's office without revealing who she truly was. Her laughter became easier, her days quieter. Lawrence, charmed by her humility, called her his calm after the storm. They married 6 months later in a modest church. There were no reporters, no jewelry, no hint of her old life. Alicia stood beside him with joy and fear tangled inside her, believing that love was enough to replace all she had given up. But marriage, she soon learned, carried shadows of its own. Lawrence's mother, Mrs. Barlow, eyed her with constant suspicion. "You brought nothing to this home," she said one afternoon while Alicia was washing dishes. "You expect my son to feed you forever." Alicia smiled faintly and kept her eyes on the sink. "I married your son because I love him, Ma. That's all I have to give." "Love," the older woman's laughter was sharp. "Love doesn't pay rent. Women like you end up on the streets." Her sisters-in-law joined in the quiet torment. They whispered about her childlessness, made jokes about her silence, and left her to clean after family dinners. Lawrence said little. At first, she thought his silence meant peacekeeping, but soon it became neglect. One night when she reached for his hand, he turned away. "Maybe we should see a doctor," she whispered. "Maybe you should," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "I'm fine." Weeks later, his phone began to ring at strange hours. His excuses came with practiced ease: late meetings, urgent clients. The perfume on his shirt told her otherwise. Alicia sat on the edge of their bed one evening, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through his messages. There it was, her husband's affection written to another woman, words once hers now freely given to someone else. She felt the ground give way beneath the weight of truth. When Lawrence walked in, she rose to face him. "You're seeing someone else," she said quietly. He looked at her without guilt. "And if I am, what can you do? You can't even give me a child. What use is a wife like that?" The words struck harder than a slap. She had no strength to argue. The woman who once commanded rooms with a glance now stood broken in a rented apartment, realizing that love had turned its back. That night, she packed her bags. When she walked out, Mrs. Barlow and her daughters sneered. "Where will you go?" one of them mocked. "You have no job, no money. You'll crawl back here before sunrise." Alicia zipped her bag and straightened her shoulders. "You'll be surprised," she said, her voice calm, her eyes steady. She dialed a number and waited. "Ellen," she said when the line connected, "come get me." 15 minutes later, a silver Aston Martin glided into the compound, its engine purring like a quiet storm. Ellen stepped out in tailored grace, her presence commanding silence. "Ready, sister." Alicia nodded. Without another word, she entered the car. The gate opened, and they drove off, leaving the Barlows staring in disbelief at the woman they thought was helpless. As the city lights stretched ahead, Alicia looked out of the window, her heart set on rebuilding her name, not for pride, but for peace. The woman who left her world for love had lost everything, but she was about to reclaim herself. The car stopped before a tall glass building in the heart of the city. Its lights shone against the night like a promise of beginning again. Ellen turned to her sister. "You'll stay with me until you decide what you want," she said softly. Alicia nodded. The weight of her silence filled the car. She had no tears left. "Thank you," she whispered. Ellen's eyes softened. "You're my sister, you don't thank family." Inside the penthouse, the air smelled of fresh lilies and quiet music. Ellen handed her a cup of tea. "Rest tonight," she said. "Tomorrow you'll remember who you are." Alicia lay awake long after her sister had gone to bed. Her mind kept circling back to the years she had wasted, the insults she had swallowed, the dignity she had traded for affection that was never real. For the first time since leaving home, she allowed herself to breathe without fear. The following morning, she stood by the window as sunlight crept through the blinds. The city below was already alive, cars moving, people rushing, dreams chasing time. She wanted to join that movement again, to live without apology. She walked into the kitchen where Ellen was having coffee. "I'm ready," she said. Ellen looked up. "For what?" "To return to work." Ellen smiled faintly. "Then let's remind the world who Alicia Wilson is." By the end of the week, Alicia was seated in her father's former office, now hers by inheritance but long left untouched. The staff greeted her with polite surprise. The nameplate still read Chairwoman, Wilson Holdings. She ran her hand over the desk, feeling the cold surface beneath her fingers. "Welcome back, ma'am," said Mrs. Andrews, the firm's longtime secretary. "It's been quiet without you." "Not anymore," Alicia replied. "We have work to do." For months, she devoted herself to rebuilding the firm. New partnerships were forged, old debts settled, and projects expanded beyond borders. Her leadership was measured and clear. She spoke less and acted more. The woman who once hid her identity now stood before investors and board members with composure born of fire. One evening, after a long meeting, Ellen entered her office. "You've changed," she said, leaning against the door. "I had to," Alicia answered. "When life burns your home, you either stay in the ashes or build something better." Ellen smiled. "And you've built an empire." Alicia turned toward the window. The skyline glowed beneath the dusk. "Not yet," she said quietly, "but I will." Months passed. Her name began to reappear in magazines, on television, and at corporate events. Wilson Holdings became one of the top sponsors of an upcoming national business launch aimed at supporting small firms. Alicia insisted on leading it herself. "Everyone deserves a chance," she told her board, "even the ones who once failed." The night before the event, she stood alone in her home library. The shelves were lined with her father's books, his notes in the margins, his quiet advice preserved in ink. She ran her hand across one of the spines and exhaled deeply. There was peace in the silence now, not the empty quiet of suffering, but the stillness that comes when one has survived. Her housekeeper entered. "Madam, will you be attending the launch personally?" "Yes," Alicia said. "It's time." She picked up her purse and car keys. The journey she was about to make was not toward revenge, but closure. She wanted to see how far she had come and to face the man who once told her she was nothing. The Grand Meridian Hotel was dressed in gold that evening. A long red carpet stretched from the entrance to the marble-floored lobby, where guests arrived in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. The chandeliers above glowed like constellations. Every seat bore the logo of Wilson Holdings, the host of the evening's event, the Future of Enterprise, annual collaboration gala. Lawrence Barlow arrived early, his chest puffed with pride. His small firm had received an invitation weeks before, a chance to pitch before some of the country's wealthiest investors. He adjusted his tie in the mirror near the reception and smiled at his reflection. "This could be the night," he told his colleague. "If we secure this deal, our firm will finally be recognized." He walked into the hall, shaking hands with anyone who seemed important. When he turned, his smile faltered. Across the room, near the large window overlooking the city, stood a woman in a silk navy gown. Her posture was graceful, her gaze distant. Alicia. For a moment, he doubted his eyes. The woman he had mocked, the wife he had thrown aside, now stood among people of influence. Yet her calm face betrayed nothing of their past. He approached her, confidence returning like an old habit. "Well, look who we have here," he said, his tone laced with mockery. "I didn't know this event allowed visitors." Alicia turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Evening, Lawrence." "So this is what you do now. Attend parties dressed like this. You left your home for fashion shows." "I came here for business," she replied. He chuckled. "Business? Don't tell me you're one of the sponsors. These people don't mingle with women who walk out on their husbands." She said nothing. Her silence unsettled him, though he covered it with a smirk. "You must miss my house, don't you? The meals, the family, or maybe the woman you've become now prefers a different kind of comfort." Before Alicia could answer, a voice from the stage called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We begin in 5 minutes." She turned toward the hall without another word. Lawrence stood watching her, confusion tightening inside him. Something about her calmness felt unnatural, like a secret waiting to surface. Inside the ballroom, cameras flashed as the event commenced. One after another, small firms presented their proposals. Lawrence's turn came late in the evening. He spoke passionately about his architectural vision, using every ounce of charm he had. When he finished, polite applause followed, though Alicia's face remained still. Then came the final announcement. The host's voice carried across the hall. "And now, to close the evening, we invite the CEO of Wilson Holdings, Miss Alicia Wilson." A sharp hush fell over the crowd. Lawrence froze. The name echoed in his head before disbelief gave way to dread. Alicia stepped onto the stage with steady grace. The light from the chandeliers touched her face, revealing quiet authority. She stood behind the podium and began to speak. "Tonight," she said, "we celebrate vision, perseverance, and partnership. Wilson Holdings was built on the belief that true success comes from giving others a chance to grow. Many of you represent firms with great potential, and we are honored to support your journey." Her voice carried through the hall, clear and controlled. "Our selection process was difficult. We reviewed every proposal carefully, and I'm proud to announce the firms chosen for our partnership program this year." She listed several names. Each one drew applause. Lawrence waited, his palms damp, his heart racing. When the final name was read, his firm was not among them. Alicia smiled faintly and closed her folder. "Congratulations to all who made it. For those who didn't, remember, failure today can be the seed of tomorrow's strength. Thank you." The audience rose in applause. Lawrence sat motionless, the color drained from his face. Around him, people whispered her name in admiration. Alicia descended the stage and spoke briefly with other executives. As she turned to leave, Lawrence hurried after her. "Alicia," he called. She stopped. He struggled to find his voice. You're the CEO, all this time." "Yes," she said quietly, "all this time." He looked away, shame washing through him. "I didn't know." "You never asked," she replied. "You only judged." She moved past him toward the exit. The crowd parted as she walked, leaving Lawrence standing in the middle of the room, small and exposed under the glittering lights. The city was quiet when Alicia's car pulled into the driveway of her estate. The gates closed behind her with a soft, metallic sigh. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Benita, waited at the door, her face bright with relief. "You're back early, madam," she said. "The event ended well," Alicia replied, handing her purse to her. "I just needed to leave before the noise became too much." Benita smiled. "Shall I bring your tea?" "Please," Alicia said and moved toward the sitting room. The room was wide and serene. Soft light from the chandelier brushed across the marble floor. Alicia sank into the armchair, the quiet pressing gently around her. For the first time in years, she did not feel small. She had stood before those who once scorned her and spoken without trembling. Yet the image of Lawrence's face as she walked off the stage lingered in her thoughts. She was not angry anymore, only saddened by how easily love could rot when pride took root. Ellen came in soon after, her heels tapping lightly across the floor. "So," she asked, a mischievous smile playing on her lips, "how did it go?" Alicia lifted her eyes. He was there. Ellen sat opposite her. "Lawrence." "Yes, he mocked me before the event began. He thought I was some aimless guest." Ellen's brows arched. "And when he saw you on stage?" He couldn't speak. The man looked as though the earth had moved beneath him. Ellen laughed softly. "Poetic justice." Alicia shook her head. "Justice isn't what I wanted. I only wanted peace." "You've earned it," Ellen said, taking her sister's hand. "Now let the past stay buried." Alicia nodded, but a faint ache tugged within her, an ache not of longing, but of what love had failed to become. Morning came with the gentle hum of traffic beyond the gates. The house smelled of fresh polish and coffee. Benita walked into Alicia's study, a nervous look on her face. "Madam," she said, wringing her hands, "you have visitors." Alicia looked up from the papers on her desk. "Visitors?" "Yes, ma'am. It's your former husband and his mother." For a moment the room went still. Alicia's pen stopped mid-line. "Show them in," she said calmly. Benita hesitated. "Should I?" "It's fine," Alicia said. "Let them in." When Lawrence entered, his eyes darted across the lavish room. The tall shelves, the grand piano, the soft gleam of wealth that once could have been his comfort. His mother followed closely, her scarf trembling in her hands. Alicia stood beside her desk, straight and composed. Mrs. Barlow spoke first, her tone uncertain. "Alicia, my dear, we came to apologize." Alicia regarded her quietly. "For what, Ma?" "For everything," the woman said. "For the words I said, for how we treated you. I didn't know who you truly were, had I known." Alicia's expression tightened slightly. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" The older woman's eyes faltered. "Maybe not, but I would have respected you." Lawrence stepped forward. His voice was low. "Alicia, I made a mistake. I was foolish. I let my family poison what we had. I know now what I lost." She folded her arms. "You didn't lose me, Lawrence. You threw me away." He lowered his gaze. "I came to ask for another chance." Alicia's eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. "I've already forgiven you, but I can't return to what hurt me." He took a step closer. We can start over." "No," she said. "You can start over with yourself. I've already begun a new life." Mrs. Barlow began to weep quietly. "Alicia, please, my son has changed." "I'm glad to hear that," Alicia replied, "but I no longer belong in that story." She walked to the door and gestured gently. "Benita will see you out." Lawrence looked up one last time. "Do you ever think about us?" Alicia paused, her back turned. "Only when I need to remind myself how far I've come." She walked away as Benita led them to the gate. The door closed softly behind them, leaving only silence in its wake. Alicia stood by the window, watching the garden sway in the breeze. The world outside looked calm, as though nothing had happened. She knew, however, that something within her had finally settled. She was no longer the woman who needed to be loved to feel worthy. She had found her worth in the ruins and built her crown from it. The weeks that followed brought a quiet steadiness to Alicia's days. She no longer woke to memories of heartbreak, nor did she carry bitterness. Her mind had shifted from what she had lost to what she could give. Wilson Holdings had grown faster than anyone predicted. Newspapers called her the silent architect of a new corporate age. Yet, beneath the shine of success, Alicia sought something deeper, a reason to make her wealth matter. One morning, she sat in her office, sunlight spilling across the documents spread before her. Ellen entered holding a cup of coffee and a folded newspaper. "They're calling you a mystery," Ellen said with a grin. "The woman who rose from nowhere to reclaim her empire." Alicia smiled faintly. "Let them think so. Sometimes mystery protects peace." Ellen placed the paper on the desk. "There's a call from the governor's office. They want you to chair the Entrepreneurship Summit next month." "I'll accept," Alicia said, "but I also want to create something smaller, something more personal." Ellen tilted her head. "What kind of project?" "A foundation," Alicia said, her voice firm. "To help women who have lost everything start again, widows, single mothers, women like I once was. I want them to rebuild their names, not depend on anyone's mercy." Ellen smiled, pride softening her expression. "That sounds like you, sister. You turn pain into a mission." Alicia looked toward the wide window. Pain is only wasted when it leaves nothing behind. The Alicia Wilson Foundation launched 2 months later in a modest hall filled with women from every corner of the city. Some came with infants strapped to their backs, others with weary eyes that told stories of endurance. Alicia stood before them in a white dress, simple yet commanding. "When I lost everything," she began, "I learned that dignity isn't given by wealth or marriage, it's earned by survival. You are not your failures. You are what you choose to rise from." The women listened in silence, some wiping tears. For many, it was the first time they saw someone powerful speak their truth without shame. After the speech, a young woman approached her. "Ma, I don't have an education, but I can sew. People mock me for it." Alicia smiled gently. "Then sew until they can no longer laugh. Let your work speak before your mouth does." The girl's eyes shone with new hope. That evening, as the event wound down, Alicia remained behind, walking through the empty chairs. She could still feel the warmth of the crowd lingering in the air. Benita approached quietly, holding a folder. "Madam, this came for you," she said. Alicia opened it. Inside was a proposal from a small firm seeking partnership under her mentorship program. The name at the top stopped her hand: Barlow Designs, owned by Lawrence Barlow. For a moment, she stared at it, her face unreadable. Ellen, who had joined her, noticed the paper. "Lawrence again." "Yes," Alicia said softly. "He's trying to enter the mentorship network." Ellen frowned. "You'll reject it, of course." Alicia placed the folder on the table. "I don't need revenge, Ellen. I just won't interfere. The board can decide. My peace doesn't depend on his rejection." Ellen looked at her sister for a long moment and nodded. "You've truly healed." "Maybe not completely," Alicia said, her tone calm, "but enough to let go." Later that night, Alicia sat in her garden, the cool air touching her face. The sound of the fountain mingled with the chirp of crickets. The peace she once chased in love had found her through purpose. She leaned back in her chair, eyes lifted toward the dim sky. Somewhere beyond the stars, her father's portrait seemed to watch her again, not from a wall, but from memory. "Papa," she whispered, "I didn't lose myself after all." A light breeze brushed through the flowers, and she smiled faintly. The world felt wide again, full of quiet promise. Alicia Wilson had rebuilt her crown, not for pride, but for every woman who ever thought her story had ended. The rain that afternoon fell in slow, heavy drops over the glass windows of Barlow Designs. Inside, Lawrence sat behind his desk, his face drawn, his tie loose, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The once busy office was quiet now. 2 desks stood empty, employees who had resigned after months without pay. He rubbed his temples and stared at the latest report. The numbers were merciless. Clients had withdrawn contracts, investors had backed out, and bills piled on his desk like silent accusations. "Sir," his assistant said hesitantly from the doorway, "the landlord called again. He said if we don't renew by Friday, he'll take back the office." Lawrence nodded faintly, unable to meet his eyes. "Tell him I'll handle it." The door closed, leaving him in the muffled sound of rain. He leaned back and exhaled deeply. Handle it. He had said those words too many times. When Alicia walked out of his life, he had assumed he would move on easily. But what followed was not freedom. It was decay. The contracts she once helped him secure through quiet influence had vanished when she withdrew her silent support. Clients who once admired his confidence now saw through his arrogance. His mother called daily, asking about money. His sisters mocked his failure in whispers. Even the woman he had once cheated with had left when the dinners turned into debts. That evening, Lawrence left the office and walked home under the cold drizzle. The city lights blurred against the rain, reflecting in puddles like broken promises. At the same time, across the city, Alicia sat in a studio for a televised interview. The Alicia Wilson Foundation had gained national attention after funding several small businesses led by women. Her calm composure filled the screen as she spoke. "Our goal," she said, "is not just to give capital but to restore confidence. When you help someone believe again, you rebuild more than an economy, you rebuild lives." The interviewer smiled. "You've become a voice for women across the country. Do you ever think about how different your life might have been if you hadn't left everything behind?" Alicia's lips curved slightly. "If I had stayed, I would have had wealth but not peace. I think I made the right trade." The audience applauded softly. Cameras flashed as the segment ended. Later that night, as she left the studio, Ellen met her by the car. "You're everywhere now," she said with a teasing grin. "The papers, the screens, even the governor quoted you in his speech yesterday." Alicia smiled faintly. "Then I hope they listen to the message, not the name." Ellen looked at her sister for a long moment. "You've come far, Alicia. Father would be proud." "I hope so," Alicia said, her gaze drifting to the night sky. "But I'm not done yet." Back at Lawrence's apartment, the television played softly in the background. His mother sat on the couch watching the same interview. When Alicia appeared on the screen, she gasped. "Lawrence," she said sharply, "come see this." He emerged from his room, weary and half-dressed. His eyes landed on the screen. There she was, composed, radiant, untouchable. His mother turned to him. "That woman was your wife," Look at her now. You had gold and you threw it away." "Enough," he muttered, walking back to his room. But the words clung to him like smoke. That night he could not sleep. Her voice from the interview echoed in his mind, steady, clear, unshaken. The next morning, he stood at his office window again, watching the clouds drift apart. His pride, once his armor, now felt like a chain. For the first time, he saw how blind he had been. He whispered to himself, "I destroyed the only good thing I ever had." The phone on his desk rang. It was his assistant again. "Sir, the landlord is here in person." Lawrence straightened his tie and faced the door. The downfall of a man rarely happens at once. It happens in quiet, deliberate stages, and his had just reached its last. The invitation had not come to him directly. It was forwarded through an old friend who worked with one of the foundation's event partners. Lawrence had stared at it for almost an hour before deciding to attend. The words on the cream-colored card seemed simple enough: the Alicia Wilson Foundation Gala, celebrating women in enterprise. But to him, they carried weight. He arrived early that evening in a dark suit that no longer fit perfectly. The hall shimmered with gold light and soft music. Laughter filled the air as guests moved about in tailored dresses and pressed suits. Lawrence stood by the entrance, uncertain, his hands buried in his pockets. A photographer passed by, took one look at him, and walked on. He was no longer the man people noticed. That suited him. Alicia entered later, escorted by Ellen and 2 members of the board. The hall seemed to pause when she appeared. Her gown was deep green, simple but commanding. The same woman he once dismissed as timid now held the room with quiet authority. He watched her from a distance. She greeted guests, exchanged smiles, and gave short remarks with her usual grace. When their eyes met briefly across the room, he saw a flicker of recognition, but no surprise, no anger, only calm acknowledgement. He turned away first. During the dinner session, Lawrence took a seat near the back. The speeches rolled by: the growth of the foundation, testimonies from women it had helped, plans for future partnerships. Every word reminded him of what he had lost. When Alicia stepped up to the podium, the light softened. "Tonight," she began, "we celebrate courage. Not the loud kind that demands notice, but the quiet kind that keeps moving when no one believes." Her voice carried through the hall, gentle but firm. "We are here because each of us chose to rise after being broken. That is the real victory." Applause followed, long and warm. Lawrence found his chest tightening. Rise after being broken. The phrase cut through him. After the event, as guests began to leave, he walked toward her. Ellen noticed him first and hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Alicia gave a small nod, signaling it was fine. "Good evening, Alicia," he said quietly. She turned, her tone polite. "Good evening, Lawrence. It's been a long time." "Yes," he said, his voice low. "Too long." There was a silence that stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy. "I've followed your work," he said. "You've done well, better than I imagined." She studied him for a moment. People become who they were meant to be once the weight of false expectations is gone. He nodded slowly. "You're right, I was blind to what mattered." "I know," she replied softly. "That's why I left." He swallowed hard. "Alicia, I came here to tell you I'm sorry for everything. Not for losing you, but for wasting the years I had with you." Her expression remained composed. Apologies are only as real as what follows them. "What will you do with the years you have now?" He had no answer, only silence. She continued, "Forgiveness doesn't mean restoration, Lawrence. It means release. I forgave you long ago, but what we had can't return to what it was." "I understand," he said quietly. "Still, I needed to hear it from you. For a moment her eyes softened. Then you have. He nodded once, stepped back, and left before the tears behind his eyes could betray him. Outside, the night air was cool. The city hummed with distant music and traffic. Lawrence stood on the pavement, watching the lights blur through the drizzle. Somewhere inside, the orchestra began a final piece, a slow, hopeful melody that drifted into the street. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in years, he felt something that was not pride, not pain, but release. The fall had ended. The climb, though uncertain, had just begun. Lawrence woke before dawn. The silence in his apartment pressed against him like an unfinished thought. He had lived in the same two-room flat for nearly a year, long enough for the furniture to gather the smell of dust and soap. Nothing of his former life remained except a wristwatch Alicia had given him. He never wore it now. He kept it in a drawer. He brewed coffee with the last spoonful of powder and drank it slowly while reading through a newspaper. The headline mentioned a new rehabilitation center funded by the Alicia Wilson Foundation. The article said it would train single mothers and young men in practical trades. He folded the paper. The decision came quietly. He would go there, not as a partner or guest, but as a worker. He needed something that would make him useful again. By mid-morning, he reached the center. The building stood on the edge of town, modest and freshly painted. Children played under a half-finished awning while volunteers arranged tables inside. A tall man in a gray shirt greeted him at the entrance. "Good morning. You here for training or to help?" Lawrence hesitated. "To help if you'll have me." The man smiled faintly. "We always have space for helping hands. Name's Victor." Lawrence introduced himself and followed Victor inside. The hall smelled of paint and cement. He spent the rest of the day lifting boxes, arranging tools, and scrubbing the floor. It was the first honest work he had done in years, and though his back ached, there was a steadiness in the pain that felt right. At noon, they gathered for lunch, plain rice and stew served in metal bowls. A young woman across from him spoke about how the foundation had paid for her sewing training. She laughed easily, unaware of who he was. For the first time, he didn't feel the urge to tell his story. He listened. By evening, the sun lowered itself into a red haze. Victor clapped him on the shoulder. "You worked hard. Come again tomorrow." Lawrence nodded. "If you'll let me." Victor smiled. Anyone willing to work is welcome. As he walked home, his shirt damp with sweat, Lawrence realized he had gone a full day without thinking of himself as a victim. The simplicity of that thought felt like peace. 2 weeks passed. He became a regular helper at the center, fixing shelves, teaching basic accounting to trainees, even repairing old chairs. Sometimes, Alicia's name came up in conversation. The workers spoke of her with quiet respect, saying she visited unannounced and worked beside them when she could. One afternoon, she arrived. Lawrence was repairing a desk near the window when she entered with Ellen and a few staff members. He froze, uncertain whether to step away or continue. She noticed him at once but said nothing. Instead, she walked over and watched him work for a moment. "You're getting better at carpentry," she said lightly. He looked up. "It keeps my hands busy." "That's good," she replied. "Idleness ruined enough of our lives." He managed a faint smile. "It did." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said, "The center could use someone to oversee accounts and coordinate volunteers. I heard you've been helping with that." "I have a little." "Would you take the role if offered?" He blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. "You'd trust me with that." "I don't hold grudges, Lawrence. People grow. Besides, the foundation isn't built on judgment. It's built on second chances." He looked down at his calloused hands. "Then I'd be honored." "Good," she said, and walked away to greet others. That evening, when the workers dispersed, Lawrence sat alone in the courtyard. The air carried the soft sound of laughter and hammering from nearby workshops. He thought of the man he once was, the arrogance, the cruelty, the blindness. Then he thought of Alicia, standing firm through it all, and realized that her strength had never been in wealth or appearance. It had been in her quiet resolve to keep moving. He leaned back and whispered to himself, "Maybe this is what love looks like when it grows past pride." A light breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere inside the center, a child began to sing, a small, clear voice that rose like a promise. Lawrence listened until it faded, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel ashamed of being alive. Alicia woke before sunrise. Her housekeeper had left fresh flowers by the window the night before, their petals still damp from the night air. She stood for a long while, watching the city lights fade beneath the growing light. It was her habit now to greet the quiet before the world stirred. 3 years had passed since the divorce. She had built more than companies in that time. She had built peace. But peace, she had learned, was not something one won. It was something one accepted after learning how fragile it could be. That morning she had a full schedule, board meeting at 10, lunch with a foreign investor, and a visit to the rehabilitation center by afternoon. Yet, as she dressed, she felt the stillness pull her inward. She sat at her dressing table and looked at her reflection. The woman who stared back was the same, yet older in truth, not in years. The world called her Madam Wilson now, and though she smiled when they did, it was Alicia who remained underneath. The same woman who once traded silk gowns for cotton dresses in a small apartment, chasing love she thought was real. She rose, picked her handbag, and stepped out. The rehabilitation center buzzed with movement when she arrived. Children played near the gate, and young men hammered away in the carpentry shed. Lawrence was in the courtyard, guiding a group of trainees through a bookkeeping exercise. When he saw her, he stood straight, nodding respectfully. "Good afternoon, Alicia," he said. "Good afternoon. How are the trainees managing?" "They're improving. Some of them could run small shops by next year." "That's what we hope for." She turned to one of the young men and asked about his work. The boy answered shyly. And Alicia smiled, encouraging him to speak louder. She had grown used to moments like this, seeing effort bloom where despair once lived. After a while, she asked Lawrence to walk with her. They moved toward the garden behind the main building, where a narrow path led to a small pond. "You've done well here," she said. He shrugged lightly. "I'm just following your vision." "No, you've made it work. There's a difference." He looked at her then, sunlight cutting across his face. "I used to think power meant control, but working here I learned it means service. I owe that lesson to you." Alicia smiled faintly. "Maybe we both learned something. You learned humility. I learned to stop saving people who don't want to be saved." He lowered his gaze. "I wanted saving, I just didn't know it." There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "You've changed, Lawrence. That's something to be proud of." "Do you still hate me?" "I never did," she said. "Hate ties you to the person who hurt you. I wanted to be free." He nodded slowly. "And you are." "Yes, but freedom doesn't mean forgetting. It means forgiving and moving forward." Her words settled in the air, soft yet final. Later, when she prepared to leave, the workers gathered to thank her. The sun dipped low, throwing gold light over the courtyard. Lawrence stood by the gate as she entered her car. "Goodbye, Alicia," he said quietly. She looked at him once more. "Goodbye, Lawrence. Keep the work going." "I will." The car rolled away down the road, the center shrinking behind her. She leaned back against the seat, her thoughts calm. The past no longer tugged at her, It had become a lesson, not a wound. That night, Alicia wrote in her journal before bed. The entry was brief. I once thought love was sacrifice. Now I know it is freedom. The kind that lets you walk away when staying would mean losing yourself. She closed the book and turned off the light. The darkness that filled the room no longer felt heavy. It felt like rest. The morning air was light with promise. The city had gathered at the Wilson Hall for the official unveiling of the Alicia Wilson Initiative, a new branch of her foundation dedicated to helping rural women start local enterprises. Journalists, investors, and young entrepreneurs filled the vast room, waiting for the woman whose name had become a symbol of quiet endurance. Alicia arrived without spectacle. Her navy suit was simple, her jewelry modest. Yet, as she stepped to the podium, the room hushed. Ellen stood near the front row, pride in her eyes, remembering the sister who once wept in her apartment after leaving a man who could not see her worth. Alicia adjusted the microphone and began, her tone calm but steady. Years ago, I thought strength meant having the world at my feet, she said. I had wealth, influence, and comfort. Then I gave it all up, believing love alone could fill the spaces those things could not. It didn't, but what I found in losing everything was far greater. The audience leaned closer, drawn in by the quiet weight of her words. I discovered that real love begins when you choose yourself. It isn't built on submission or the fear of being alone. It is built on truth, respect, and the courage to walk away when those things are gone. Applause filled the hall. She paused, allowing the sound to fade. This initiative is my way of passing that lesson on to every woman who has been told that her value lies in what she gives up. I stand before you as proof that loss can be the beginning of freedom. Her gaze moved briefly across the audience. In the third row, she noticed Lawrence. He wore a modest gray suit and sat beside Victor, the coordinator from the center. Their eyes met for a second. He smiled faintly, a gesture neither pleading nor proud. She returned it with quiet acknowledgement before continuing her speech. After the ceremony, guests mingled around the refreshment tables. Ellen joined her sister, handing her a glass of juice. You spoke from your heart, Ellen said. You always do. Alicia smiled. That's the only way to speak. They stepped aside to greet a few guests, investors asking about expansion plans, young women seeking advice. Each person left her presence lighter than they came. When the crowd thinned, Alicia walked toward the glass doors that opened to the terrace. The city stretched wide before her, the sky painted in shades of orange and violet. Lawrence approached quietly. It was a beautiful speech, he said. Thank you, she replied. I meant what I said the last time we spoke, he continued. Working with your foundation has changed me. I'm grateful you allowed me near what you built, even after everything. You earned your place, Lawrence. The past doesn't decide what you become, choices do. He nodded, his voice low. Then I'll keep choosing better. Good, she said. That's all any of us can do. He hesitated, then added, I wish you happiness, Alicia. You already gave me that, she said. You just didn't know it. He smiled, bowed his head slightly, and left her there on the terrace. Alicia stood alone as evening approached. The hum of conversation drifted from inside, softened by distance. She looked at the skyline towers of glass reflecting the setting sun and felt no ache, no trace of bitterness, only stillness. Her driver waited by the car, but she lingered a moment longer. Freedom, she thought, was not about escaping pain. It was about understanding it and walking forward anyway. She turned, her heels clicking lightly against the marble floor as she headed back inside to join Ellen and the others. The hall glowed under warm lights, alive with the sound of people building something larger than themselves. Alicia smiled. Her life, once broken by betrayal and pride, had become whole again, rewritten by grace, shaped by endurance, and sealed by quiet triumph. And yes, it truly belonged to her.